Key mod jump scare. In 2025, in this economy, all jokes aside, we have the coveted Knights Armament SR-15 Mod 2 FDE that's unfortunately also in Keymod. Even though Keymod is actually fine for 99.9% of things, it's just a little on the ugly side of things, and wrapping your hands around the dick mod rail is a little sus if I'm being honest. Now, full disclosure, I don't have any relationship with Knights Armament, and they don't like civilians much anyways. This complete rifle was actually sent in for review by a kind viewer of the channel, Cody, who let me play with it for several months and put a couple thousand rounds on it. Small tangent, this is why I'm perfectly fine never accepting another product from a manufacturer. My viewers are infinitely more generous and less corrupt. So to all of those who have helped out the channel, thank you very much. Now, getting into basics, KAC is known for having some of the most intensive fanboys in the industry. They can flex on the pores for the gram, but can they actually shoot? Or a more relevant question, is KAC actually good? It's certainly hyped up enough, like a homebrew IPA from your local hipster brewery. It still tastes like piss. And the KAC is, well, pretty good, with a couple of notable exceptions. So let's start out with the basics. Out front, we have a QDC 3-prong flash hider, which doubles as their suppressor mount. In terms of a flash hider, it's pretty good, and in terms of a suppressor mount, I think it's heavier and more complex than what I would personally like to see, but for a military application, I think it works well, and the Knights cans are a vibe all to themselves. One important note here is that Knights Armament cans are low back pressure, and so that is what the system is designed to run with, so some of my critiques are from changing the system, so just know that going forward. Moving back, we have a 16-inch cold hammer forged chrome-lined barrel with a 5.56 chamber and a 1-in-7 twist. The profile is somewhat of a middleweight profile, not quite a government, but it looks similar. Now, Knights does their barrels, bolts, and gas systems a little bit differently. The extension in the barrel is slightly different, needing the use of a special reaction rod to work on the thing, which the owner fortunately provided with the rifle. This means that the bolt on the BCG is also specialized, this being their round lug E3 bolt. More on that in a moment. Now, before we move on to the gas system, I do want to say that the barrel is the best part of the rifle, in my opinion. In terms of accuracy, I was able to get right at 1 MOA 5-shot groups with multiple loads, and it shot quite well with regular 55 grain M193. In fact, it was very consistent at nearly 500 yards with just a red dot magnifier and a 15-mile-an-hour crosswind at reduced size targets. So at least in terms of the accuracy I was able to get out of it, it is more than acceptable for a fighting rifle. Now, the gas system is where things get a little bit more interesting. As you can probably tell by the photos, the gas block slots into the barrel with the alignment tab. In front of the gas block journal, the barrel is actually threaded, and a jam nut torques the whole system down. That's a very secure way to mount a gas block. Is it needed? No. Is it better than a pinned gas block? No. Is it much more complex and expensive? Yes. Either way, it's still a good way to mount the gas block. PWS and Q do a similar thing with their gas blocks, but I believe Knights was the first to do it. Now, the gas tube is also a little on the special side, as it doesn't get pinned to the gas block at all. It actually has a flange that fits around the fitting on the gas block, and then that gets torqued down via a nut in a system that looks and performs very similar to an older car's brake lines. Some may call this needlessly complex and overkill. That would be me, but it also virtually eliminates gas leaking from the gas block or tube, meaning that you get 100% of those gases coming straight back at your face, which means you get 100% of that gas back to your face.
Ah, damn. Okay, yeah. Heavier buffer. Here we come. Ah, oh, that hurts. Ah, my eyes. Ah, my eyes. I can't see. Why isn't it reloading?
Now let's talk about my main issue with the rifle. Even though the gas rings died at about 2,000 to 3,000 rounds, if you plan on using a non-flow-through can, don't. Just stop. It's miserable. Even with the heaviest buffer and spring combo I own, it's just a gassy, miserable experience. Now, my supposition in this affair is that the hyper-efficient gas seal is really good at sending that extra gas supplied by my cans directly into my eyeballs. Now, to be fair, the system is designed to be used with their reduced back pressure cans, and if you did use another brand's low back pressure can, I am sure the experience would be much better than what mine was. What's not my fault, though, is the gas rings being gone at a relatively low round count. Even with hot M193, the rifle stopped cycling at one point without a can, and then with a can it was a miserable experience, so pick your poison. Now, gas rings are a wear component. Most of the time they last between 5,000 and 10,000 rounds, but here we're around the 2,000 round mark. That's not quite PSA microbest level bad, but it was a little bit surprising because I thought these were the peak of reliability. Now, for those of you furiously typing away, go ahead and take this time to cope in the comment section down below. Swerving away from problems for a minute, let's get back to the Handguard. Now, the Handguard has an IBN, an integral barrel nut, meaning that the Handguard is the barrel nut and vice versa. This makes for a very rigid system with an annoying installation and takedown process, but that aside, I think the rail is good. When KAC would actually sell you these as a standalone option, it would have been a neat system to build off of. Now, talking about the installation for just a moment, because I think this would be miserable to do myself, the first thing you have to do is time the Handguard, and then you can drop your gas block in place, fiddle with it until it learns its place, like whoever Diddy had locked in his basement, and then you can take this comically long tool to torque the whole thing into place. Then you can install your muzzle device, and keep in mind this whole time you need their special handguard wrench and reaction rod to get this done. Moving back, we have a mil-spec-ish upper, which is good, and an LMT charging handle, which may just be a typo, but it doesn't help with gas at all, so it's kind of irrelevant. And finally, we get to the E3 BCG. Now, this isn't the sand cutter carrier, so you KAC purists can put it away. There's no need for that behavior here, show some self-control. But the round lug bolt with the lobster style extractor is very good. I think it's a mostly excellent BCG. The only issue that I have already mentioned is the gas rings that are in need of replacing. Now, the wear and tear on the bolt is basically non-existent. The finish is very good. It's very mil-spec, but again, it's wearing in exactly as it should be for around 3,000 rounds. Now, for the KAC criers right now saying that it was my fault the gas rings are gone because I used a regular can on their vaulted hyper-durable SR-15, I only shot maybe 100 rounds total suppressed before I just gave up. So if 100 rounds suppressed can burn out your gas rings, well, that's a self-report on your part. Now, KAC does ship these with their iron sights, which are great iron sights, but more important than functionality is that they look cool. Moving to the lower, it's kind of mil-spec, but with slightly updated controls. We have a right side bolt release, but no bolt catch, which isn't my preferred style, but still a slight upgrade. We have an ambi selector that's good, and the best part of the lower is the trigger. The KAC 2-stage trigger gives most other duty style triggers out there a run for their money. Take your pick of what's your favorite, but I would put the KAC right up there with the best. Kudos, fantastic, no complaints. Short first stage, 4.5 pound total pull, short positive reset, rinse and repeat. A couple small things though. One, the buffer that shipped with this rifle, marked SR-15, was only 2.95 ounces, or a standard carbine buffer, which is way less than what a system like this should be using. On what most of I could find, these should have shipped with a 4.7 ounce buffer, which is more appropriate for this overgassed system. Now, I did switch to a heavier buffer once I started shooting suppressed. Most of the time I was using an H2, though at one point I did try to tame the system down with one of the KAC K-spec super heavy H3 buffers. But this must have been from a lot before they switched to the heavier standard 4.7 ounce buffers. One more note on the lower is that the buffer tube and stock have a buttery smooth fit, very nice, no movement whatsoever, but that doesn't really matter at all when it comes to performance. Now, I should mention that the HRF Concepts magwell is a nice little 3D printed piece that can help with reloads and doesn't add weight or affect function. I repeat, it does not affect function, as it does not touch the magazines when they're actually seated in the lower receiver. The reason that is important to note is because the rifle seems to be magazine sensitive, like it completely refused to function with some Lancer mags. Maybe that's just a quirk of this system that no other AR I've ever owned has had, but to each their own, I guess. KAC guys are a little special after all. Now, when it comes to shootability without a suppressor and with the gas rings mostly gone, I would say it's a relatively soft shooting rifle. I've heard some reviewers claim that these are the softest shooting rifles in existence, and while they are certainly fine, I have an explanation for this discrepancy. They're lying. Or coping, take your pick. With a flow-through style can and a heavy buffer, I am sure this would be a fine system, but it's really nothing out of the ordinary for an AR at a non-ordinary price point. In terms of function, the accuracy is very good, can't take that away. The reliability wasn't perfect and has the magazine quirk, but maybe that's just a me problem, but also maybe I just don't think those quirks are worth $3,000. Now, of course, if we talk about value, it just doesn't do anything to justify its price one dime over a BCM or Geisley or insert your favorite mid to high tier manufacturer. But I actually think that's fine. I know people who buy Atlases or Staccatos or name your absurdly priced object. That's all good. If you have money to spend and you like the thing, that's fine. I know people who collect KACs and love them, and as someone of mild autism, that's all good. We all have our little tism. But on the other hand, if you try to tell me that it's the greatest thing ever with no issues and is beyond reproach, well, you might be a little too far down the Knights Kool-Aid Club pipeline. Maybe Mr. Knight should spend more on QC and less on legal fees, but I digress. If the price tag was $1,500 to $2,000, I think that it would be a legitimate good buy for a lot of people. At double that, not so much. Another thing I kind of dislike is their attitude towards civilians in general. Their false scarcity, keeping prices high, and selling limited amounts of spare parts is very frustrating, especially considering their list of military and LE contracts is surprisingly short compared to what you might think. Maybe it's a combination of mismanagement and nepotism, but who knows at this point. Maybe it's time the sun sets on the night so the dark night can rise. What a stupid way to end a video.